Hello and welcome to a special edition of Spectator TV. And the reason we are bringing you a special edition of Spectator TV is that after Rishi Sunak announced that there would be an election yesterday, a lot of people speculated that he was shooting the Reform fox, which is meant to mean that he was outwitting Reform and their growing standing in the polls. And that Reform were going to be a bit scuppered by his election move. A lot of people are saying this on the right. So we thought, who better to ask about this than the leader of Reform, Richard Tice.
Thank you for having me. Great. Listen, it's exactly the opposite. The truth is...
Let me ask a question first. Have you been scuppered by yesterday's election?
The truth is, he stood there drenched in the rain. He was outfoxed by Steve Bray, Ramona-in-Chief, with his boogie blaster. He looked ridiculous. It highlighted the incompetence of the Tory government. And I've been saying for months, don't underestimate the prospect of a summer election. What's actually happened is he's so petrified, and his colleagues, by what they're hearing in their safe seats from MPs saying, a lot of reformers out there, we're worried, that we're going up in the polls. They've been sinking in the polls, and they're thinking, well, if we don't do it in the summer, all of a sudden, heaven forbid, they might equal us in the polls if we run it long. So look, we thought it was eminently a possibility, and inevitably sort of everybody sort of slightly thought after May the 2nd, well, it's going to go long, but I was far from convinced. So look, I'm not at all surprised. In fact, the truth is the people who've been wrong-footed are all the Tory backbench MPs who were told it was going to be in November, who are now furious because they're not going to get their extra salaries and they're all going to lose their jobs. And there was sort of unbelievable chat. They might try and destabilise them and get rid of them. I mean, what a farce, what a shambles.
Well, I could see that point, but can you just take me through the day of Richard Tice yesterday?
I think the first rumours hit me at about 10 to 10:30, and it was quite clear. I think the post that I took most significance from was actually Tim Shipman.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is clearly... So we basically knew by late morning that this was a certainty, and that's fine, onwards and upwards. So we're full steam ahead, and we've done our press conference this morning, which went extremely well. We highlighted, and we knew, because we were getting ready for these disastrous immigration figures that we knew would be disastrous this morning, and contrary to the ridiculous suggestion from James Cleverly that this is good news. I mean, the man is just a barefaced liar. I'm sorry. 685,000 net. That's a city much bigger than the city of Manchester. Net. Gross, that's a city the size of Birmingham that has come to settle in just 1 year in the UK. And the pressure that this mass immigration is imposing on the UK is unsustainable. Here's an unbelievable stat. More people are settled in the UK under mass immigration with the Tories, complete betrayal of what they promised, in the last 2 years than in 950 years up until 2010 from 1066. That's the level of extraordinary numbers. And what it's doing is, it's mass immigration. It depresses wages of British workers, undercuts wages, and is unfair, particularly on young people. It's putting huge pressure on housing, again, really unfair on young people. Housing rents in the last years up on average well over 20%. House prices are unaffordable for most people, and they're also putting unbelievable pressure on our healthcare system. Again, everybody loses out. It's just not fair.
But Richard, I can see you've got a very convincing message, particularly on immigration. It's going to be a popular...
The immigration election.
The immigration election, but what everyone's saying is Reform were not prepared. Are your candidates ready? Have you got all the procedures in place?
Candidates approved and allocated. All the nomination papers are going out. We've got all the dates.
Going out? Should they? Are you less prepared than, say, the Labour Party?
You can't send them out until you know the days of the nomination dates.
Right.
So they were literally all ready. All the constituency names on, they're all ready. So that's all going out. I've got 500 approved and allocated. I've got, like all parties, you're filling in the last gaps of the jigsaw, as we are. In fact, I think we're probably more prepared than the Tory party, frankly.
And better vetted?
Well, look, everybody has their vetting issues. I mean, you know, you have all sorts of vetting issues, from the Green Party to Labour with their anti-Semites. But everybody has their issues. Vetting is like an MOT. It's only valid on the day you do it. And if someone then does or writes something daft, what I'm actually quite proud of is that when someone gets found out for having written or said or typed something daft, we call it out and we deal with it faster than any other party. And that's because we're not going to take this nonsense. Whereas some of the others, they try and shuffle it under the carpet, suspend them for a year and hope everyone forgets. That's not our style at all.
Well, let me tell you about the rumour that I'm hearing in Westminster, which is that the Tories got wind of the fact that Reform might be announcing Nigel Farage was coming back to Reform, was going to run for Reform next week, which would be Thursday next week. And one of the reasons they announced the election was because they were nervous.
You've just proved my point. They're petrified of us.
Was there going to be an announcement?
The reality is, of course, we were looking at all sorts of options. Yeah. And Nigel wanted to come back and campaign. You look at all the different ways of doing it, and when you're looking at any form of plan, proper project and plan, you look at the range of options. And so, but you've proven my point, which is they're terrified of us. They're petrified of a poll rating. They fear Nigel, and Nigel's going to come and campaign, and we are going to cause them serious problems. And rightly so. They've broken this country. They've betrayed all their promises. They've made people poorer. They've made the quality of life worse, and they deserve a damn good punishing. And frankly, on the medium term, our objective is to say, look, folks, you're not up to the job. You're just like the Labour Party. You're socialists. You want high taxes, big state, mass immigration. That's not what your voters want. We need to put out a serious, credible alternative. I may have proven your point, but you haven't answered my question, which is that was Nigel Farage going to announce that he was running for Reform next week? We were looking at all options. So it was on the cards that would happen? Everything was being looked at, and you look at all the options saying, well, what happens if he runs a summer election? What happens if it goes long? What's the right thing? So, of course we'll look at options. That's what you expect. That's what smart, well-run entities and organisations do. But then this morning, Nigel Farage publishes this letter saying he's going to focus on the American election. That's not what he said. I mean, the thing about Westminster... It did a little bit. The thing about I'm not doing the Westminster. Hear me out. But the thing about Westminster rumours is they weren't very smart, were they? Because no one in Westminster predicted what would happen yesterday. No one. Which proves that actually Westminster's not as smart as it thinks. And sometimes it gets things very badly wrong. And what Nigel actually said in his letter this morning was he's going to campaign with Reform for the next few weeks. He's not broadcasting with GB News to allow himself full flexibility to do that. There's a real plus side of not standing in a seat, which is that it's much easier to campaign everywhere. Whereas if you're trying to do both, much harder, as he's experienced in the past. And he was weighing up that experience. And then it also, the other upside, is that then it gives him the opportunity to work in the States later in the year. But he did mention the States, and I think it is a fair criticism, and it's not just Westminster Village people saying this, that Nigel Farage is supposed to be a politician that cares about Britain and so on, and yet here he is at this crunch moment in British politics, and he's talking about the American election. Maybe he's not saying the reason I'm not going to run is I'm focusing on the American election, but he's certainly talking about that, and that seems to be his focus. Does that not slightly undermine this idea of him as this great patriotic British complete nonsense? Honestly, I've rarely heard such nonsense for a long time. The reality is that he's going to help in this campaign, which is now for the next 6 weeks. Then he's got the opportunity to help in the States after that. And the most patriotic thing is to make sure that the strength of the relationship with the likely next president of the United States, particularly if there's a Labour government, which all the pollsters and everybody says there will be, then actually you need someone who is close to Donald Trump, who is going to be patriotic for the United Kingdom and make sure that our interests are protected and served well. America's our biggest, most strategically important security ally, defence ally, and indeed trading ally. And the idea that you've got people like David Lammy and Sadiq Khan whinging and whining about Donald Trump, actually what's in the patriotic British interest is for Nigel to be very close to Donald Trump. That is serving Britain well. What's very interesting about David Lammy is his complete reverse ferret on Donald Trump, is it not? Well, that he is now making great overtures to Trump world. Well, we're seeing all sorts of reverse ferrets in the Labour Party. I mean, that's what you see from Keir Starmer downwards. But look, I'm delighted Nigel's helping. I've always said the more help he can give, the better. And it's going to make a significant boost in Nigel's face all over billboards and posters. And leaflets. So that's great. And I think Westminster's completely got this wrong, not for the first time. And we're fighting an immigration election because it's the central reason why people are feeling poorer, why the quality of life is going down. I want smart immigration, right? Where you welcome an equivalent number of people into the country to those who are leaving, give or take 450, 500,000 a year, highly qualified, highly skilled, who are not going to abuse the system, the visa system, like the international students. And that's the way that's the right thing to do.
What are Reform going to say about Rwanda now that it looks like we're not...
We've always said the same thing, which is it's a ridiculous farce, an utter waste of taxpayers' money, hundreds of millions. I mean, this government they're just so willy-nilly about wasting our cash. And I'm furious about it. It's been a complete distraction. All they've sent there is 3 Home Secretaries, 300 million quid, and 1 migrant who they paid $3,000 to go for. I mean, it's pathetic. It really is. Seriously, the only way you'll stop the boats, and this is the other important thing, is you've got to pick up and safely take back. The Tories haven't got the guts to do it. Keir Starmer wants more people coming across in the boats, not less. These people don't care that 15 people have already died this year. 15 that we know about. We're the only party with a kind and compassionate policy that will stop the boats. And by the way, it's what the EU leaders should do in the Mediterranean.
But you don't buy this argument that eventually the EU leaders are going to catch up with the same idea, which is that eventually we're going to have to find developing world countries.
We know it's not a deterrent because more than 20% migrants have crossed the channel this year in the full knowledge that technically they're not treated as asylum seekers and that technically they might be sent around. So it's clearly not a deterrent. What have we got? We've got up to 10,000 already. 15 people have died. It's not a deterrent. They're viewing it as a joke, a farce, an embarrassment. Yes. And there's another reason why he's gone early, is that just imagine how embarrassing it would be. So he gets the first few flights off. There's a few migrants on it. And guess what? The boats keep coming and they keep coming and they keep coming, and they're tens of thousands. And then he looks even more ridiculous than he looked yesterday in his drenched rain with Steve Bray's boogie blast.
Do you know what a lot of British people think? Which I think you're going to disagree with this point a lot, but this is what a lot of people think, which is that Reform will come to some sort of agreement during the election cycle with the Tory party. And I know this is going to be a reaction, but maybe electoral realities, things change a lot in the next 6 weeks. Maybe electoral realities kick in.
It's another mad Westminster rumour.
It's not Westminster. I'm not hearing this from Westminster. I'm hearing this from people who have nothing to do with Westminster, who don't want a Labour government, and think that
I don't want a Labour government, but I don't want a Tory government either, because they betrayed us. You can't be trusted. They say all this nonsense. Just the other week, Sunak and cleverly said that they were going to reduce the immigration numbers, reduce the international student numbers. All of a sudden, Rishi Sunak gets a little tap on the shoulder from Big Dave Cameron, said, no, dear boy, you're not going to do that. Keep the numbers coming. Yes, sir. Very good, sir. Yes, my lord.
Yes.
Ridiculous.
So just to be clear, on the record, there will be no alliance, no deal, no coordination with the Tory party.
They deserve to be punished, and they will be punished.
Okay. And I'm going to come back to Nigel Farage as the last point. And I know it's boring for you to be asked about this a lot, but a lot of people talk about this. Your relationship with him, has it been strained in the last 24 hours? Have you had a difficult conversation with him?
Not at all. No, absolutely not. Look, we're very good friends. We think on very similar lines, almost identical lines. And probably the thing we argue most about is whether or not to have a glass of red or a glass of white, to be honest.
Right.
No.
So these rumours that he calls you the hairdresser and so on, that's all rubbish.
Well, I mean, maybe he's jealous that, I haven't got grey hair. I'm only joking.
You do have better hair, that's true.
No, it's all rubbish. Look,
right.
I'm very grateful that I have got, I'm lucky enough to have some hair. Any rumours that the hairdresser's been putting colouring in is also complete nonsense.
But if you could control Nigel Farage's output over the last 24 hours, would you have stopped him putting out that letter this morning? Saying that he wasn't.
No, completely the opposite. I welcomed that, because obviously what it did was clarify before the press conference that he was going to help during the campaign. Brilliant. Thrilled to bits, which is why I was able to say I was excited and thrilled at the press conference that he's getting stuck in. Marvellous.
Right. And do you have a target for the number of seats you want to win?
Obviously, about 325.
Okay, but I mean, realistically,
you have to be an optimist in politics.
Sure. But you don't have any kind of set number that you think will be a good result. I'm not saying that.
what I want is for millions of people to have the courage of their convictions, to vote for what they believe in, not what they're afraid of, to ignore the nonsense from the Tories that you can trust us. We're going to get it right this time, we promise. We've all been there before, we've been let down, we've been lied to, and millions of voters who agree with real conservative philosophy of higher wages, high growth, small state, smart immigration, not mass immigration, and zero tolerance on law and order. That's what we stand for. And if you believe in that, if you think the country's in a bad state, if you want change, you've got to vote for it.
And I get that you're depressed I get that you're angry at the Tory party. I think that's fair to say.
True,
you're angry at the Tory party, and I think a lot of voters feel the same way, and that's a lot of your appeal. What I want to know is, over the next, however many, 6 weeks it is, will you attack Labour and the Conservatives?
Yes, absolutely. They're identical. There's no difference between the two. So absolutely, we're attacking Starmageddon, and they want what the Tories want, which is higher taxes, bigger state, mass immigration. They don't care about the boats coming across. They've got no plans to stop that, and they've got no plans to grow the economy. And by the way, both of them utterly obsessed with the job-destroying, industry-killing net zero, which is a disaster for the steel industry, a disaster for automotive industry. It's killing communities. It's actually killing old people who can't afford the heating. When we've got all this fantastic energy treasure under our feet, that would create huge amounts of economic growth. And yet these two main parties, utter negligence not to look to use our energy treasure under our feet, our shale gas, our oil and gas. It's unbelievable. They're obsessed with net zero. It's a disaster. It's killing our economy. It's killing jobs. So we're going to put a serious alternative. And do you know what? The real winner? Democracy.
Let's hope so, Richard. Thank you so much for coming into Spectator. We're very grateful. I know it's been a very busy day for you, so we're very grateful to you for coming in.